All right, so Stephen, this roster construction idea. Keep taking desperation transfers who are below average players. Need to stop with that from the 440. I do think, I mean, and I get a little tired of it, frankly, because I feel like, I mean, everybody, I get it. The coach is going to be like, hey, whatever, but they, I think, sell people a bill of goods. And the idea that the three transfers are Isaac Likely, Tanner Holden, and Sean McNeil, right? Am I missing anybody? Those are the three new transfers this year that are supposed to solve everybody's problems. And Tanner Holden was good at Wright State. And it's like, oh, hey, Tanner Holden. And then they try to make it sound like a big deal. It's like he's out of the rotation. Now it's like, what do you think? Like, how do you think this is supposed to work? Right. I mean, again, Isaac Likely and Sean McNeil had roles at like below average teams. I don't like, and I understand, Stephen, that this is part of college basketball now. We get it. They didn't want Malachi Branham to go to the NBA. Malachi Branham did go to the NBA. So now they have to go get some guys. They had a couple guys leave. I understand that. But I think the level, and Justice Suing is just like a 4. He's like a 4th option to me. And they, to me, have sold him as a 2 or a 3 since he got here. And it's not about the players. It's about the roles and the burden that this team is expecting them to play and forcing them to carry when they bring them in here. And I think they wind up elevating all these transfers to a higher level of expectation than they should. And I think we see that the results of that right now, Stephen, but I am really tired of the bill of goods in the offseason. Like, can we please be real about this stuff? I am not surprised what the transfers are doing, but it sure doesn't match up with the way these guys were selling them when they got in here. So like, what are we to make? We talk about the transfer portal so much with football. What are we to make? It's more important in basketball. What are we to make of the way Ohio State basketball has used the transfer portal?
I don't have a problem with the Likely and McNeil transfers because you brought them in here and said, you saw what you were doing at the school you're at, come do the exact same here. We don't want any more. We don't want any less. That was the sales pitch with those two guys because you still need a shooter on the court, and you also need a guy who is kind of like a Draymond Greenish. Jayshawn Tate, he's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, does a little bit of everything, but it's not a guy who demands the ball because you're expecting that ball to be in Bryce Sensabaugh and Bruce Thornton and Rodney Gale's hands. I don't want to say that Tanner Holden and Justice Suing are misses at transfers because that's not the right way to put it. I think they're bad shots. Because you're right. They have sold Justice Suing us on this idea that Justice Suing is probably your second best player when more importantly, if he's your 4th or 3rd best player, it's probably a really good basketball team. Because you remember the year they went number 2, that had the number 2 seed, he was the 3rd best player behind Dwayne Washington Jr. and E.J. Liddell. That's a great spot for him to be in because you're not asking for him to bring it every single night. You're asking him to do this night, this night, but don't worry about being the dude because we've got 2 dudes who can do that. Even last year, there was going to come a point where Malachi Branham was going to turn into Malachi Branham, so he was going to be their 3rd best player. That's fine because now you're relying on E.J. Liddell and Malachi Branham to be your dudes, and your 3rd best guy is a little bit of everything. This year, he had to start out the year being the dude, which he never should have been put in, and now he's your number 2. And more importantly, Zed Key is also like a number 2. They're like number 2A and number 2B, and they should never be in those 2 positions. But that's I don't want to say it's a lack of development, but you took a guy trying to make him more than what he was. He's a 3rd option at best, probably best at being your 4th option, though, if you really want to maximize him. And that's not how they've used him really the 2 years that he's been 100% healthy to play for this team. And then with Tanner Holden, look, man, I get it. He averaged 11 points as a freshman, 16 points as a sophomore, and 20 points as a junior at Wright State in the Horizon League. That was I even said it when they got him. That was never going to translate. 20 points in the Horizon League is probably 5 to 8 points in the Big Ten. That was never going to translate. So the fact that the excitement there was almost too much excitement about getting a 20-point scorer from the Horizon League, thinking that he was going to take that next jump and be able to do exactly what he was doing at Wright State and doing it here. Instead, he's playing 15 minutes a night, and the most impressive thing he's done is that game-winning shot at the buzzer. But other than that, he hasn't been, anything close to what he was at Wright State because he was never going to be that.
So why aren't they doing better in the transfer portal? If the 3 transfers they got this year were a defense-only guy from Oklahoma State, a shooter from West Virginia who basically doesn't do much else, and an overmatched Horizon League guy, why aren't they doing better? Why aren't they getting Kansas's 8th guy and making him the second guy here? Why aren't they getting guys who are stepping up from mid-majors and can handle the jump? Why aren't they better at this? Why aren't they getting higher? They are relying on it.
Yeah.
They are relying on it, and they're getting guys who are not capable of the roles. Because, listen, you're saying they said, hey, come here and be the exact same thing. They're playing Sean McNeil 30 minutes a night. They're playing Isaac Likely 24 minutes a night. I mean, I guess you can say only shoot and only defend, but they are leaning on these guys as absolute primary top 7 rotation members, and they're both one-dimensional. So if they were asking them to be that, like, how come they aren't shooting higher and getting better transfer portal guys? Shouldn't they be? This is Ohio State. Malachi Branham just left for the pros. Shouldn't that be a prime spot that a better quality player wants to fill?
Yeah, unless I think they thought they'd get more from the freshmen at this point. So going to get the role player transfer was fine because they were going to be asked to be role players while the freshmen became stars. When that didn't happen, it makes why didn't you do better than in the transfer portal, like, kind of show out a little bit more? Like, to put it in football terms, if Tanner McAllister would have been Ohio State's best defensive back last year, then we would all have been like, why is this the best defensive back you got out of the portal? But he wasn't. He wasn't the best defensive back. He probably wasn't even, at best, he was the 3rd defensive back. And that's because he was a starter. But even then, it's like you saw the talent behind him coming. The younger talent that was supposed to come never really showed up. And we're more than halfway through the season, and it doesn't happen. So it does make the transfer decisions look a little worse than if, Roddy Gale had come along a little bit further, and so he had started stealing minutes away from Sean McNeil as the season went on.
Couple rotation questions, which I think you're leading us here to, Stephen, because it just is a little bit of an odd team of, like, old transfer, almost role players and freshmen who aren't quite ready yet. And there is practically nothing in between. Mm-hmm. I think the construction of this team, mostly transfers, freshmen, and a guy suing, who was mostly hurt last year, shows in what seems like a lack of continuity and knowing how to play together. It's odd because it feels like they have more guys that are rotation worthy than any recent Ohio State team, and yet here we are. Holtman does deserve blame for not making it work. That's a good text from the 330. Also, does Likely deserve this much playing time? Reward Eugene Brown with more time for more Tanner Holden? I don't get it. That's from the 614. When you think about this, Stephen, it feels like you're saying they're a little bit caught in between on maybe wanting to go to some younger guys, but maybe feeling like they're not ready. Like, what would you change anything about this rotation? How do you think maybe this rotation should or could change over the last 8 games of Big Ten play?
I think it's over now. You're 3-9. And you're probably not making the tournament unless something ridiculously magical happens in March when you get to the Big Ten tournament. So start planning for the future. When you have a lost season like this, just go young. Let them make their mistakes. Let them get their reps. Let them figure it out, because then that pays off next year when you're around this time, because you gave Roddy Gale and Felix Sapora, an extra 150 extra minutes this year that you maybe wouldn't have given them had the season gone the way you thought it should go. So I'm all in on the young guys at this point, because if you're going to lose with the young guys that are coming back and can benefit from these extra minutes at this point. It doesn't, like, the planning to win games. I don't think that should be a part of the equation at this point, because you're not winning games. So if you're going to lose games, lose with guys who can at least gain experience.
From the 513, Chris Holtman is officially a downgrade from even the bad tail end of the Mata years. No offensive system, relies on playing slow and running sets that just don't work. Every year is hero ball. Just put in the freshmen and tell them to run the floor. Holtman had the benefit of the doubt for me, and he seems like such a good dude, but he's a problem now and not an answer for the future. What do you think of how they try to play? Like, is this Is that a problem offensively? Like, let me go. Is this the right one? From the 614, the offense just seems bland and bad, not exciting or fun. Sensabaugh is the only one worth watching, and he'll probably leave for the NBA after the year. Holtman is supposed to be a point guard guy. Now he has another top 50 point guard on the team, and he's averaging 1.4 assists a game since the Northwestern win. The offense just seems boring and bad. Offensive system, Stephen, what's up?
It's so crazy that we say that because according to KenPom, this is the 15th best offense in the country. And for most of the year, it was a top 5, top 10 offense. So it's a little bit of both. I think it's not as bad as it's been in years past, where it feels like they're running the same set over and over again just to waste 17 seconds to get EJ the ball. I think the beginning of the year, they started out executing very well. And then Bryce Sensabaugh started to play better and play like a guy who he might go to the NBA. And it feels like as the season has gone on, the execution has gotten worse, and it's turned into Bryce Sensabaugh is going to shoot it 20 times a game, make 8 of them, maybe get hot late and make a couple more of them, and hopefully somebody else comes along with the ride for him. And so because of that, I said they're 15. At one point in the season, they were top 5, they were top 10, and they're like gradually headed downward in that adjusted offensive efficiency because of that idea that it has turned into the Bryce Sensabaugh show. That's coaching. Number one, that is always coaching, because at some point you've got to go, dude, you can't keep shooting bad shots every night. You can't keep doing that, because when it's good, it works because he's got like 20 plus points. But then there's also nights when it doesn't work and things look awful. At some point as a coach, you've got to say something to him about that. But then that's also some of that is on the player to understand and kind of just build that IQ as the season goes on. And that hasn't happened either. But that is first and foremost, they are not executing at the level they were the first 10 games of the season. And that's on coaching. And that's on Holtman. And it's also on Diebler, because he's their offensive coordinator.
I just really don't care anymore. I stopped caring 10 or 12 games ago. I never watched them from the 614. We're going to cover that. That is dangerous territory for a program. That is dangerous territory that an athletic director needs to hear about. From Brian on the 843, here's a rant. Lack of development, just as suing Zed Key and Eugene Brown this year. Just no on-court leadership nor skill development that makes a difference. Example, suing just disappears for entire games, and that's been the same since year one. Had to have that growth from these upperclassmen to take advantage of whatever Holtman can get with the freshmen and transfers. Same thing in past years. Liddell grew, but no one else did. Some regressed. Number 2, poor offensive scheme, especially on set plays coming out of timeouts. The conversion percentage has to be horrible. They are just as likely to turn the ball over than convert. 3, poor in-game adjustments. Example, close game losses to North Carolina and Purdue. The team had no idea how to break the press. I mean, isn't that just basketball 101? Or at least make an adjustment if it happens twice in the same game. So that's a list of a bunch of stuff wrong that a texter did not like. Here's another one that I find interesting. A lot of questions, Stephen, and rants about continuity and that kind of thing. From the 614, basketball, like football, has become more complex with the transfer portal and NIL, but everyone is dealing with the same challenges, which is we have to keep that in mind. Whatever the rules are, everybody's doing the same thing. So go by results. This team doesn't necessarily feel like they have a good team culture. Are they friends? Do they like each other? Modest teams seem to sincerely like each other and have a great culture. Holtman's teams, not so much. Failures at roster management, particularly with a complete failure to recruit big men. Zed Key is a bench energy guy and not an elite Big Ten center. He always disappears in Big Ten play. Why doesn't Tanner Holden get more minutes? So I do think, Stephen, it's one of those things where who knows? I mean, how do we know if they like each other? But if someone is watching the team and saying they play like they don't like each other, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that is an issue. I think what it is, I don't think it's a like thing. It's a no. They play like they don't know each other.
Yep.
They've been together for 9 months. And this is not Kentucky. This is not Duke. This is not North Carolina. This is not one of those schools where you just lose half your roster every year and you pile on a bunch of new NBA guys and you just do it all over again from scratch. That's not what Ohio State is. They should be a quality basketball program, but they're not that. So they can't do this. This is a old and young. This is a, hey, 1 year rental. Hey, can you help us until the guys we really want to play are healthy, are ready to do this? And some young guys is like, hey man, You're our future, so show up and show up fast. Hurry up. Can we get to January where you guys are good finally? And it's a weird mixture for a program at Ohio State's level that shouldn't be building its program like that. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes maybe every 3 or 4 years when you're pressing the reset button, you get to seasons like this. And sometimes you overcome it. Sometimes you don't. Ohio State's not overcoming it. But they don't know each other. Isaac Likely got here in July, June. You know, Sean McNeil got here July, June. Tanner Holden got here July, June. Justice Suing didn't play last year. He didn't play. He hasn't played basketball in a year before this season because he was dealing with an injury all last year. Zed Key's in a very different role than he's ever been in before in his life. And then there's freshmen. That's a lot of new parts coming together to expect them to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten, which is why I was always in a situation of they're probably going to be middle of the road. Sometimes it's going to look really good. Sometimes it's going to look really bad. But at the end of the day, they're going to be a middle of the road Big Ten team. And the really bad has just stuck a lot longer than the really good ever did.
Yeah, they stink. People thought they'd be middle of the road. They were picked in the preseason 6th. They're 12th. Like, this is the thing about this. We've danced around conversations like this, Stephen, like in the past couple of years. And it's always been like, well, I mean, they're kind of right there. They're 12-8. They're 11-9. They have a good win. This is a bad team. And if you're offended by that, go look at the standings and go look at the record. That's what's different about this. And I have another comparison I'm going to make later that this reminds me of so much. And it's particularly about Chris Holtman. But it's one of these things that, like, I don't know what to tell you. They have a bad record. And by the way, like, the idea of, like, hey, every now and then this happens. This is going to be their worst Big Ten record in 25 years. Since Jim O'Brien went 1-15 in year 1. 25 years. So, by the way, no. This is not what happens like every couple years. This is horrible. And I have them. We have a survey. What do you think they'll finish? I have them finishing 6-14 in Big Ten play, which means they're going to win 3 more games. They'll finish 3-5 in their last 8. No guarantee of that. I'll tell you that. But even at that, a 300 winning percentage in Big Ten play, right, is horrible. Like, it's going to be, is that 300? Did I do it wrong? Yeah, that's 300. 6 out of 10. No, 6 out of 20, 3 out of 10. We won 3 out of 10, 6 out. Yeah, that's as bad as since 25 years ago, Stephen. So, like, as bad as it got at the end of the Mata era, as bad as it was for a couple years of Jim O'Brien, right? It has not been this bad since the program completely imploded and fell apart under Randy Ayers, and Jim O'Brien had to come in and sweep it up. So this is not normal. This is not, well, every now. No, it's not. Not this bad. Not this bad. And I do think, Stephen, when it's this bad, and it's why I wanted to wait, because we were percolating when they were 3-6, and they had been 3-6 in Big Ten play. This was the 4th time in the last 7 years. Like, they start off bad in Big Ten play a lot, to the point the texters made that you made about, hey, they had bad Januaries. So I wanted to wait. I wanted to see what these next 3 at Indiana, home Wisconsin, at Michigan. I wanted to see what happened. And it was bad, Steve. Like, it's been bad the last 3 games. It's been bad. Anything bad that you thought, it got worse. They didn't just lose. There were just times where it's like, there is such a gap. There is a giant middle in the Big Ten. Purdue's on top. Purdue might win the national title. If Nathan were here, he'd be like, well, you know, Matt, Purdue hasn't made a Final Four since Gene Katie was in diapers. We know that. Purdue's excellent. Rutgers is pretty darn good. And then there's a group of like 8 teams that are practically all the same, and Ohio State's not one of them. So I think, Stephen, in the past, we've had conversations like this at times when Ohio State's in that middle muck, and it's like, well, they're not terrible, but they're whatever. And like, as people listening to this is not that. This is Minnesota stinks. Minnesota has 1 Big Ten win, and it's against Ohio State. And Nebraska stinks because they can't figure it out. They can't figure out basketball. And then it's Ohio State. Those are the only 2 teams Ohio State's ahead of in the standings. So how much should this terrible, terrible, terrible result so far, Stephen, change that conversation, right? Because we've had versions of this conversation, but I waited. I wanted to see what this podcast would be like, because I wanted us to do this on this Sunday night, February 5th. I had it circled. Okay, I want us to do this now. Maybe we'll be doing a 3-game winning streak. They're back to 6-6. It's the same old January swoon, but now here they go. I was absolutely open to being to that podcast, Stephen. We're not only here because they stink. We wanted to get a vibe. How much should this change how people view it, that this is going to be, unless they rally? I don't know how they would. Unless they have an incredible rally, it's going to be the worst Big Ten record for Ohio State basketball in 25 years. What does that mean?
I think this losing streak is worse than the one they had before they beat Iowa, which is not that long ago. And you pointed out why. When they were on that 5-game losing streak, they were losing competitive basketball games. So it's like, yeah, you're losing. So even if it's an annoying take to have, it's like, oh, okay, if a ball bounces here a different way or there a different way, you can fix that. Even if it's a losing, you can fix that problem, even if it's a problem that seems to not want to go away. The Illinois game was bad. The Indiana game, Tracy Davis-Jackson just had his way with Ohio State. That's bad. The Wisconsin game, they lost by 5. They did not lose that game by 5 points at all. It got close late. And even the Michigan game, if it's not for a weird thing at the end of that game, they lose that game by double digits. This time around, it felt, I said it before the start, that's almost the theme of this pod. They are starting to shovel the you-know-what. And I'm not sure what to point at right now and go, this is how they get out of that. Because Bryce, up until this Michigan loss, Bryce Sensabaugh had led this team in scoring for like 14 straight games. So this is not Bryce Sensabaugh can just throw this team on his back and do something to win a basketball game, because that's not working either. They just need guys to play better. They need people to coach better. But more importantly, it's not fireable. And I texted that today. This is not, there's too many elements here and things at play for this to be a fireable like season. But it's
I'll have something to say about that opinion later. I'll have something to say about that.
Yeah, I know. Later. But I do think this is let's sit down this offseason. Let's have a conversation about what we're doing here. Because
what's the conversation? Because they have a good recruiting class coming in. What's the conversation? What's the fix? Is the fix, now we're going to have 2 good back-to-back recruiting classes? Like, what's he going to change? I can't save my comparison anymore. I can't save it. He's Kevin Stefanski. Chris Holtman reminds me of Kevin Stefanski so much. It blows my mind. Really he is the coach of a team that has more talent than its record is showing. Both teams started off early in the season losing close games. Like, they didn't know how to win. They were right there. Their coach did nothing to get them over the top. And then gradually they started getting their butts kicked. And you look at the roster and the talent and you say, I think they should be better than this. And then I ask myself, what is the coach doing? Tell me something the coach is doing to make them better, to get them a win, to get them over the top, to motivate them, to scheme it up. Show me something. Are they horrible? Is Kevin Stefanski horrible? No. Is Chris Holtman horrible? No. But what are they good at? And shouldn't we expect good is okay, acceptable? And Chris Holtman has done nothing in the tournament. At least Kevin Stefanski won a playoff game and made everybody in Cleveland dance around in their underwear for a weekend. Why? What are you doing? And then my question is, couldn't you get somebody better? And what are you waiting for? What has he done? What has he done? So that's where we're going to get to later, but I couldn't keep it in anymore. And also they're kind of handsome with gray hair. And everybody's like, oh, well, if you think, this, it's like, okay, I'm sorry, excuse me. And the other thing is they're both efficient. Early in the Brown season, people would throw out, and I like those kind of stats. And they would throw out efficiency stats. And Jacoby Brissett is this. And I'm like, yeah, but would you look at the record? They can't win a game. So when you say Ken Palm stats about offensive efficiency to me, it's an absolute great thing to cite. And I want to take those stats and set them on fire. I'm so mad about it. Then why can't you win? Why are you the only team in the Big Ten that's lost to Minnesota? Why have you won 1 game in the last month? I don't how can you be, how difficult can I get an analytical stat about how unlikely it is to be this efficient and this terrible? And could I please get them about both the Browns and the basketball Buckeyes? Take your efficiency and cram it. Win a game. Now, I sound like a crazy old person, and I don't like crazy old people. But win a game. Oh, my God. I can't. How is it possible that they're this bad is the thing that I get back to. 6 years, Holtman's teams play no defense. We never have a tall center. We don't even have a power forward. Perimeter D is awful, and they are terrible at defending the three. The three-point defense is almost, hey, let's just hope they miss. That's from the 717. I ran it so much, I'm officially out of breath. Not interesting or fun. I'm not sure that I have a rant in me for this basketball team because I've kind of given up caring about them. It's not just that they are a team on a bad streak, but it's more that they aren't interesting or fun. They've lost a lot of games in ways that make my head hurt. So it's easier to just not follow them right now. I've always liked Holtman, and he seems like a genuinely nice person, but something doesn't seem to be working, and it falls back on him. I'm not sure they can fire him because of the extension, but I don't know how you make things better without going to that extent at this point. That's Nate in Indy. It's just a frustrated Nate in Indy. This one from the 770, the biggest issue here is the inconsistency from game to game, the different lineups and the variation of who's playing well in each game. It seems like each player on the team has had one or two good games to give us hope, besides Bryce, but we can't get consistent performances from anyone else. Is that coaching, matchups, youth? Hard to figure out what this team's identity is. It doesn't really hang its hat on anything besides hoping Bryce goes off and trying to just hang around in games. I don't see any real adjustments or growth. If that's coaching, then we have to consider making a change because we've only seen one really strong team for Coach Holtman, and that was in year one with Thad's roster. Here's what perplexes me also, Stephen. Was not last year's team two great players with nothing else? And now I feel like this year's team is a supporting cast with no great players. Yeah. And it's like all this team needs is E.J. Liddell and Malachi Branham. And all last year's team needed was Bryce Sensabaugh, Sean McNeil, Isaac Likely, Tanner Holden, Roddy Gale, and Bruce Thornton around them to help. So they missed on it last year and they missed on it this year. And then I think you could say, well, some of that's timing. It's bad luck. Holtman's shown he can do that. He can have great players. Now he's showing he can have a depth of the roster. As one texter said, they might have more rotation-worthy guys than they've ever had. They just need it to mesh together. And I think you could say that. And I also might say, you're going to be dead from all the waiting. Quit waiting. But isn't it odd, Stephen, the construction, how different last year's team and this year's team are, right?
They're always something away. And it's always so simple. They're always
something away. Buckeye talk. They're always, you're exactly right.
I mean, we started this whole thing off with this idea. Are they a Ronnie James away? This entire podcast is, whenever we talk about this basketball team, is, wait till next year because they're going to add this thing. This is the one thing they were missing. There was a point in this year, I think it was after the Duke game, where I was like, I think this team could be a Final Four team if Malachi Branham was still here, because that's all they're missing is as a guy to end the game, as a guy to give the ball to the last 2 minutes of the game. I think they might be a Final Four team with him. I don't think that anymore because there's a bunch of other issues going on with the team. But yeah, and so you know what we're gonna do next year when they add another big time recruiting class on top of this one? If Bryce Sensabaugh does leave, we're gonna go, man, this is a really deep team. They're just missing a Bryce Sensabaugh. And then the year after that, they're going to get a Bryce Sensabaugh like, man, they're just missing a 2022 recruiting class. Good thing it's coming in the next year. So, and look, timing is timing. People make their own decisions, and that stuff kind of happens, but also tough. We're almost a decade into this at this point. Figure it out.
It's a results-oriented business. Yeah, I don't know what to tell anybody. The reason Chris Holtman got this job because he had a good record at Butler. It wasn't because he recruited a good roster one year that didn't win and another roster the next year that didn't win. But then he told Gene Smith, well, you know what? We really had a lot of good things in place. We were just one thing away each year. No, he had a good record.
Yeah. But even if but yes, it's a win. If this is a business of wins and losses. More importantly, you're almost a decade into this. Tough. Figure it out. Figure out how to stop being a year away from stuff. Whether that is, I don't completely disagree with you. I understand why and how they attack the transfer portal the way they did this past off season. I get it. Hindsight is 2020 because these freshmen have not been as ready as maybe we thought they would be. But I get it. But you learn from that. Football example, once again, I get why last year they didn't go after the Eli Rickses of the world with the cornerbacks, because you thought you had something with Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke, and J.K. Johnson. Hindsight is 2020. So what did they do this year? They went and got a big-time cornerback because they can't use that "we believe in our guys" thing anymore. Same thing that applied to the basketball team. I get why you did with the transfer portal what you did that last year. You can't do that this year. You can't bank on, any of these 2023 freshmen being ready. Because, and if they are ready, it's a pleasant surprise. But you can't bank on – that can't be the end-all, be-all of the 18-year-olds who are showing up in June are going to be the guys who save my season. Because this, like I said, this is not Duke and Kentucky and North Carolina where that happens habitually. We haven't really seen that happen since Jared Sullinger, where they got an 18-year-old and immediately he was All-American level, and it's why they were an Elite Eight Final Four level team. Because even with D'Angelo Russell as the number 2 pick in the draft, that team wasn't very good. He was just a dude. So we shouldn't do that anymore. That should not. If they approach the offseason with this transfer portal the exact same way they did this year, I'm going to have a problem with it because it's not going to make sense to do that 2 years in a row.
By the way, I kind of felt like at that time, people like the D'Angelo Russell, you were kind of like, well, people would kill for the D'Angelo Russell year right now. Are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
The number, because guess what? Bryce Sensabaugh is not going to be as the number 2 pick in the draft. The number 2 pick in the draft, and you won a tournament game?
Yeah.
And it's like, that was like, well, I don't know. It wasn't like that. It's like, please, more of that. I want to share the survey results with you, Stephen, because I really am on a joy kick, not Buckeye talk. I'm really trying to, it's just where I am. I'm very invested in people enjoying their teams. And that is the thing that I am the most worried about right now when it comes to Ohio State basketball. Here's the survey. Thanks to everybody, our tech subscribers who responded to this. If you want to be part of stuff like this, you can be a tech subscriber at 614-350-3315. What is the closest to your feeling about this Ohio State basketball season? So I gave 4 answers, Stephen, from worst to best. Totally unacceptable. Jobs should be on the line with a season like this. Terrible. I have major concerns with Ohio State basketball. Bad, but every team has a down season now and then. Rough but understandable. They're playing 4 freshmen, and this will pay off in future seasons. So totally unacceptable, terrible, bad, rough but understandable. Stephen, what do you think won?
Terrible one.
That is correct.
Yeah.
39% terrible, 33% totally unacceptable, 17% bad, 11% rough but understandable. So on the ends, the worst got 33%, the best got 11%. The two ends, the two on the worst side got 72%, and the other two on the good side got 28%. So that's 72 to 28, bad to good. I just want almost like your guess on this, Stephen. I just asked people to project. I gave them all the games that are left. They have 5 home games. That is the one thing they've played a bit of an unbalanced schedule. They're 3-9. They have 5 home games left and 3 road games left. Home games are Northwestern, Michigan State, Penn State, Illinois, Maryland. Road games are Iowa, Purdue, and Michigan State. I did write down what the records are, home and away for the teams they have left. They have a couple home games against teams that are horrible on the road. Maryland's 1-5 on the road. Penn State's 1-5 on the road. Michigan State's only 2-4 on the road. So all those are very winnable games at home. I think they lose all 3 road games. I do not understand how they would go to Iowa, Purdue, or Michigan State and win. Iowa and Purdue are both 6-1 at home. Michigan State's 4-2 at home. So I asked people, Stephen, what do you think their final Big Ten record will be if they're 3-9 now? I said I think they're going to be 6-14. I think they're going to finish 3-5. I gave them 3 road losses. I had them beating Penn State and Maryland. I have them losing to Illinois at home. And then Northwestern and Michigan State at home, I have them splitting that one way or the other. So I have 3-5 rest of the way that gets them to 6-14. What do you think they will finish, Stephen?
5-15. The Penn State game, yes. The Maryland game, yes. I agree with you. I think they lose all the road games. Those are good teams, regardless of if it's home. Yep. Even if they were home games, I'd say Ohio State was going to lose those games. I just can't. Outside of those two, I can't confidently pick Ohio State anymore. Northwestern's been
80
decent, and Michigan State has Tom Izzo.
No, there's a lot of, there's like a lot of teams that are like solid and decent, and Ohio State is not solid and decent. That is not, those are not two words that you would use to describe them right now. I gave a choice of 5-15, 6-14, or 7-13, all in a group. 79% of the people picked that. 14% of the people picked 3-17 or 4-16, which means they either they don't win another game in the Big Ten or they win one. And then 8% picked more optimistic, winning at least 5 of their last 8. So I think you or I are in agreement. We think they're going to win 2 or 3 more games the rest of this season. This is the fun equation, Stephen. This, I think, is so crucial, and I would send this to Gene Smith. In your life and as an Ohio State basketball fan, how would you rate your typical level of enjoyment of the basketball Buckeyes? 10 is high, 1 is low. And then next, how would you rate your level of enjoyment with Ohio State basketball now? So, Stephen, I'll give you a guess, 1 to 10. 10 is high, 1 is low. What it's been typically in the lives of these fans and what it is right now. What do you think the first one is? What do you think their typical enjoyment is?
6, 6.5.
That's
typically.
Exactly right. It's 6.5. 6.5. Very well done.
Base.
What do you think you do? You have the pulse of this. I would have said maybe even more like a 7 or an 8 because, there was a lot of fun in the Thad Matta era. But I think 6.5 is very reasonable. How about right now? What do you think it is?
1.5, 2.
Yeah, 2.35. And like 40% of the people are out of 1. And not a single person voted 8, 9, or 10. So from a 6.5 to a 2.4, Stephen, I think that matters. I think Gene Smith should care about that. And I am not going to tell any fan to boycott their team, to give up their tickets, to not buy jerseys or whatever. I don't like it when people call for that. I don't think that's fair. People can react in different ways. There are plenty of ways to express dissatisfaction. It's very easy to send an email. And I think ranting emails, as much as this is a rants podcast, ranting doesn't do you much good. Like heartfelt, hey, I love this program and I can't love it right now. I don't know. You get enough of those, I think it matters. And I don't think this is, as much as it's very easy to rant about basketball right now, I don't think it is unreasonable. I don't think it is wild. I don't think it is unfair. I don't think it is crazy people. I don't think this is, social media. You can't believe. I think this is real, Stephen. How big of a deal do you think it is that a program that is typically a 6.5 on the enjoyment meter is a 2.35 right now?
I mean, it's a problem. Unfortunately, there's not a game to maybe test this out and see how that fares in terms of attendance, because there's not a hot ticket left on Ohio State's schedule for a home game situation. Like if they they don't play Michigan again this year. If they played Michigan instead of Michigan State and that was a home game on March 4th and it was like the big ticket and you sold 65% of the tickets you thought you were going to sell, now that's a problem that Gene Smith needs to pay attention to, because that is a fan base that is beginning to check out. It's hard to do that when, you can get tickets for as low as $2 for the Northwestern game that's on Thursday. The Michigan State game as low as $20. These are just kind of, if you just want to do something random on a Thursday night, I'll just go check out the basketball team because it doesn't cost me a lot of money. There's not the hot ticket to really test this theory out, but it's something to keep an eye on going into next year when you get to January, because you can't gauge the first couple of months because people are still in football mode. But if that let's just say, just for an example, that first January home game, which is typically a Saturday against a Big Ten team, that game is it's a lot of juice going on inside the shot for that game typically. If that juice is not there next year, then it becomes like, all right, teams have checked out on this program. Maybe we need to think about switching some things up. And I know that's a year away and that's a hard thing to even gauge right now, but that's when you really start to show like, hey, a fan base is checked out, when at the time when you're supposed to be getting excited about a team because your football season is over, that uptick in attendance never happens. And it sticks to what it was in November where half the arena's not there. And I'm going, man, if we just only made people sit in the bottom row, this would actually be more interesting than having people spread out all over the place.
Question about assistant coaches I want to ask you here, Stephen. What's the impact of coaching changes? How do I judge how much we miss Ryan Peden on the bench from the 614? I will say, I thought in Thad Matta's last season, when the assistants were Dave Dickerson, Chris Gent, and Greg Paulus, I thought the assistants let Thad Matta down. I thought he really missed Jeff Bowles. I thought he missed John Gross, who was early on in Thad Matta's career, really, really important to him. Archie Miller was here for a brief amount of time. We saw how close Thad was with Sean Miller at Xavier. I thought Greg Paulus was sort of, in a time before I put names on it, he would be on my list of like the Bill Davis, Corey Dennis, like list of guys who I think like are not getting it done. Tim Beck. I would put Greg Paulus on this because like he got here from Duke and I was sort of like, I don't like, why is this? What is this? He's the head coach at Niagara now. Dave Dickerson is the head coach at UC Upstate, and Chris Jensen, the NBA, which again is a little bit Bill Davis, which is where he should be. He was basically an assistant at Ohio State, then went to the NBA, then came back and was an assistant at Ohio State for like a year or two, then went back to the NBA. He's a Lakers assistant right now. He's an NBA guy, but he was here. Mm-hmm. And I thought like all the recruiting stuff, I thought for a guy with a bad back, I thought Thad's staff absolutely let him down late in his career. And guess what? That's on Thad for not hiring better guys. Maybe hiring his friends instead of hiring the most qualified guys who could have given Ohio State a boost. Where is this staff right now? This is not the original Chris Holtman staff. I think he's cycled through everybody. Mike Schrage left. Brian Peden left, mm-hmm. right? Do you think he misses a guy like Peden?
I thought they'd miss Peden a lot more on the recruiting trail than they ended up actually doing for this 23 class. So kudos to Jake Diebler, who I think is a guy to watch going forward as maybe if there's a guy on this staff right now who is next in line, maybe to be a head coach, and we're not this up and coming offseason, but just in general, it's probably him. So from that standpoint, they did what they needed to do, which was, as you were mentioning, that was part of the things that the assistant coaches weren't doing under Thad Matta. I think Peden has been with Chris Holtman from the moment he got here. He was with him at Butler. So that dynamic has always been the same. And losing that maybe it drastically changed people's roles. You know, Jake Diebler's in a much bigger position than he's ever been in now. Chris Holtman and Ryan Peden catching COVID last year and having to miss some games. And so all of a sudden Jake Diebler's the head coach for a short second there, maybe ease that transition. But yeah, everybody's moving into new roles for the first time. And so there was going to be some growing pains there. Now, is it why they're 3-9 in the Big Ten and under 500? No, but if they were 6-6, then I think it's something you could lean on. If Ryan Peden was still here and these roles didn't drastically change and Chris Holtman didn't have to spend that much time hiring new staff members, because this is basically a brand new staff outside of Jake Diebler for the most part, then maybe their team is 9-3 instead of 6-6. But you can't. Ryan Peden is not the reason why this team is 3-9. So it's hard to put that at the top of the list, even though it is something that before the season, you probably needed to acknowledge that this many roles changing on the coaching staff was going to have some growing pains at some point.
All right, Stephen. So the question is if this is going to get better next year. You've chalked this up as a lost season. They're under 500. They have to be at least 500 to make the NIT. I don't know what you would point at to think that this is going to get turned around. So let's think about next year when you have 4 freshmen coming in, 3 of whom are top 50 national recruits. If you assume Bryce Sensabaugh is gone, but again, maybe you can sell him on, hey, you've got to develop your defensive game. I don't know. But if you get Bruce Thornton, who had 20 plus on Michigan against Michigan on Sunday, he's better. Roddy Gale is better. Felix Opara is better. Can this be a significantly better team a year from now? Maybe you hit on one bigger guy in the portal. If you put 2 big-time recruiting classes back to back, Stephen, is there legitimate reason to believe next season will be different?
Yeah, I mean, you can only go up from here, right? But yes, I think that
you can be the same. I asked Hugh Jackson when he was 1-15, what happens if you go 0-16? And he says, because he said he can only go up for here. I said, what if you go 0-16? He said, I'll jump in the lake.
And he jumped in the lake.
He had to jump in the lake. That was me. I made Hugh Jackson jump in a lake. So if people are going to say things like it can only go up for Ohio State basketball, I will make Chris Holtman promise to jump in a lake. So it does not only have to go up, it can stay very, very bad. So should it be this freshman class right now? Should it be significantly better next year as sophomores? And then you think about what this incoming group can do. Will they be better as freshmen than these current guys are as freshmen? Is that realistic to think?
Hugh Jackson has ruined so much optimism with the cliches for you. Like, I can just feel the PTSD coming through the screen.
Listen,
right
man.
Now.
Listen. One of us is still here, and one of us isn't. So if anyone has PTSD, it's not the guy who still has his job.
That's fair. Very fair point. I think so. Yes, and it's less about the freshmen that are coming in and more about the freshmen who are here right now, who will have a year under their belt, and the idea that they get to January and February and they will have it more figured out than they do right now. And it's a bigger pool of guys you're going to be relying on to have it figured out than it is right now, where it's only 3 guys who are probably, from a talent standpoint, their cup is probably full in comparison to the other guys who have plenty of room to grow. So from that standpoint, yes. But I'm not saying that with man, this could probably be better next year. This better be better next year. Like, there's no excuses at this point. This is not, you're not saying this happy-go-lucky. It's like, show me something better, show me results, or we should start a coaching search here, because the 8 years is enough of seeing the same. I don't even think they can go back to, it ran amok in January, got better in February. You gave it, because it's a clock at this point, right? The non-conference schedule, they're really good, and they beat a team they're not supposed to beat. So then when people come in from football, they're like, this team's pretty good. Wait, no, they're not very good. They've just lost 4 straight. Oh, wait, they got it together. They just had a slump. Oh, they had a deep tournament run. Ooh, they're going to be really good. Oh, no, they lost in the second round of the NCAA tournament because all the flaws that we saw in January didn't actually disappear. They just played worse teams in February, so they got away with some stuff. They can't go back to that. I think this is a dramatic step backwards. You need a dramatic step forward to get back even, which means
I think
Sweet
well
16.
Yeah. Because we've always been waiting for the peak. This program's had no peak in the Holtman era. No Big Ten championship, no Sweet 16. Those are peaks to me. Great. You finished second in the Big Ten with Keita Bates-Diop and Jay-Sean Tate in year 1. And I don't care about the Big Ten tournament because nobody cares about the Big Ten tournament. So they don't have the peak, but the thing that he had in his corner was consistency, was consistently being good to quite good, right? You made the tournament every year. I wrote that when they made the tournament last year. I think they were one of 4 or 5 teams in the country. We know they would have made the tournament in the COVID year. When you look at the projections for that bracket, he was 5 for 5 in the tournament. And in that time, there were a handful of teams, that were that. That does matter. But when you are 3-9 in the Big Ten, when you have the valley before the peak, now all of a sudden being consistently good, it's like, okay, well, now you're not even that. And honestly, what have you ever won? So other coaches at Ohio State have had valleys like this, but they always did it when they had a peak first. Jim O'Brien, his last 2 years, and then he got fired for off the court stuff. But his last 2 years were bad, but he made a Final Four before that, right? I mean, Thad hit a gap, but he won the Big Ten in year 2.
Gave you reasonable doubt.
He beat undefeated number 1 in year 1, which is more exciting. I would argue that's more exciting than anything Chris Holtman has done. And I know they beat Duke. Yeah. But that Illinois win with the Matt Sylvester shot, I would argue in year 1 of Thad Matta is a higher peak than anything Chris Holtman's done. And Chris Holtman can come on Buckeye Talk. The mic is open and dispute that. Year 2, they win the Big Ten. Year 3, they win the Big Ten and make the Final Four. So then anything after that, well, you've had the peaks. All right, here comes some valleys. And Thad did not get much of a valley. He did not. So now Chris Holtman's in a valley, and there is no peak. So what are you hanging on to? Okay. Stephen, we will talk about basketball again on Buckeye Talk. We will do that. I think we will certainly do something, I was going to say, before the NCAA tournament, but why would we do that? Because Ohio State won't be in it. We'll have a boisterous, what's the tournament that's worse than the NIT? The CIT?
CAB? I think it's the something. It's CIT. It's something invitational tournament. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure right now they qualify for that. But
we will have a lustrous, full-bodied preview of Ohio State versus Hofstra in the first round of the CIT in like a month. But we might not talk about basketball until then. I know this is not everybody's cup of tea, but we are going to wrap this up when we come back on Buckeye Talk.